Okay, welcome to the WTF moment. I'm sure it's been running for a while since we've been live, but Mike, as usual, is a dick. So welcome to my views on Michael Cowen. That's what we're going to
Hello,
focus
Brett.
on today. Sorry, Mike?
Hi, how are you, Brett? Nice to see you.
Good. Nice to see you as well.
Fat fuck.
I'm just kidding. We are not going to be talking about this as much as Mike can wind me up. But it's good to see you again, Mike. It's Friday again.
It's
Another moment
Friday.
for
Hey, it's Friday. Yay. Let's go drink beer. We're allowed to drink beer. Oh, we can't go buy beer today, can we? Because for some strange
No,
reason, we buy lots of beer on a Friday and get very drunk on a Saturday and all wind up in hospital on a Saturday night. Well, that's what the data says.
So actually, on that note, we have one of my favorite people in the whole world, Craig Gwing. So Craig and I used to work at Google together. Craig's gone on to do some incredible stuff. He's quite an academic. He's a world-renowned speaker. He literally, when I say world-renowned, in South Africa, that's rare. Most South African speakers will do one gig overseas and call themselves world-renowned. Craig is fascinating to follow on social media because you never know what part of the world he's in at any time, talking about really what the world's going to look like from a technological point of view, the impact on business. He's done some phenomenal research and is currently doing his PhD, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you on our show, Craig.
Well, but before you jump in, Craig, it actually looks like you're in a Harry Potter movie there because your background is now merging with your physical body and you look like one of those ghosty fellas.
You know, it's all about augmented reality, right? I mean, that's where we're going to go. Is he part machine? Is he part live? You know, specifically the X's I have will certainly tell you I'm not human. So I mean, that's a basis, right?
You have X's.
Yeah, several actually. But it's good. It's good to be here. You know, joining the Laurel and Hardy show, or whatever you want to call it. But thank you very much. I mean, Brett, to your point, I mean, it's easier to catch me. You know, the last 3 months. You know, with this crazy world that we're in right now.
Yeah, jeez, how's it, eh?
Yeah.
I mean, so part of the theme we're going to talk about today, ladies and gentlemen, is so what is the world like now, and really, what is it going to look like? And a lot of us are still focused very much on COVID and being locked down, but there's a reality. There's a reality around the data that's being fed to us and how we interpret it, how businesses are going to shift and change. And you know what? I couldn't ask for a better guest to be on our show with Mike and I because, you know, Craig, you spent a lot of time thinking, working, studying, compiling research. You've been on some interesting forums, trying to understand this. So like, I'm really looking forward to us getting into it and trying to make some sense of this world.
Yeah, so it's super interesting, Brett and Mike. You know, we spoke about, you know, what are we going to be talking about, and we thought, all three of us, that this data play is super interesting, right? As you guys know, I travel around the world and we speak to corporates, and every single corporate's data. Give me more data. The truth is, there's so much data. You guys know this. It's not a paucity of data. It's about saying, how do we get some real insights out of this data? And you know, exactly to what you said right now, the last 3 months, COVID world we're in right now, what's the data looking like? And it's the normal kind of garbage in, garbage out, right? So I figured, you know, from my side, you know, when this whole thing came out, using foresight and using trend analysis, etc., this was bound to be a big thing. I think a lot of folks thought, you know, this is and even a couple of months back, think not even 6 months, think 3 months, even 2 months ago, even now. There's some folks are saying, oh, it's just like the flu. It's just like the flu. Is it really so, right? So when things first started breaking, I was like, let's check the numbers and let's see what the numbers say. As an engineer by qualification, let's have a look at the numbers. So I did that, and I threw the numbers, and I was just tracking the numbers that are released by, you know, the Department of Health. Let's see what the numbers say, right? And before lockdown, coming off a small base, obviously, so it's almost negligible. But coming off a small base of 0, which is what we were, the numbers were growing at like 40% per day, which sounds huge, but you know, in reality, the absolute numbers are tiny. So it doesn't really shift the needle, right? But when we entered lockdown, and I must preface by saying I was looking at the number of infections, which I'll come to shortly, because is that even the right metric? It's not, and I'll explain why, right? But I used infections because that's a proxy that people speak about, and that's the proxy that some of the decisions seem to be made by, whether they're crazy or not, like Now you can go to a casino, but you can't go visit your mate for a bribe. But that's besides the point, right? That's nuts. So lockdown happens. Okay,
that's right. Though I can go to a casino and bankrupt me and my mate together.
Well, this is the premise, right? I mean, this is the other question is why casinos, why churches? Super interesting, and I'm a proponent of follow the money, right? And where the tax base goes, etc. No taxes from churches, fair, but there is a strong argument around voting, at least with municipal elections, etc., local elections this year, next year. So that's an interesting one. Anyway, so the numbers come, right? Going to lockdown and all the rest. And straight away, I don't know if you guys remember, there was a Prof. What's his name? The head of looking at the
Kasim.
Prof. Karim, I think. That's it. And he looks at the numbers, and there was that knuckle. Remember that knuckle? And he was like, "We're special and we're amazing." And his thing was, no, this knuckle happens exactly as we implement lockdown. And straight away, like the analytical person in me was like, "How can they be right? How does it straight away the next day the numbers drop off?" It just doesn't make sense, right? So now this is one of those things where you got to temper the data with like just analytics and just thinking about stuff and going, well, how's it possible that literally the next day numbers drop off? Anyway, the numbers drop off. And since then, our daily increase, so I was looking at daily increase, from then till now, our daily increase has been sitting on average of about 5.3%. Okay, so that's the average. But for the last month, it's been a little bit more. The last month, the daily average increase has been sitting at about 5.5%. So it's relatively consistent. Okay, that's what the peer numbers say. Those, again, are just numbers, and we've got to try and make sense of those. So what I did is I said, let's have a look at the 3-day increase, because the three-day increase is a nice number because it's kind of like it gives us a smoother amount, so it doesn't spike so much, but it gives us also a bit of a litmus test if you believe the amount of testing delays is anything between 7 and 10 days, right? So just a proxy to smooth numbers. And when you look at it from that perspective, since lockdown, then you wait 14 days because that's kind of like the delay time for testing and infections, etc.
Yes.
Then it becomes super interesting because in the 3-day increase, that's almost approximately consistent at 17%. Okay, so while the absolute numbers coming out are like 3,500, 4,000, 4,300, and they seem scary, the absolute numbers are huge, but the incremental, the actual percentage increase is growing at 170%. So for the viewers out there who don't quite get what I'm saying this. It's not a 100% increase, so it's not a linear increase. It's an exponential increase, but it's not an increasing exponential increase. That's what the numbers say.
So do you reckon it's because of the lag of testing and getting those results back? Because it's now 9 days lag in getting that testing, so people are recovering. The recovery rates aren't quite that accurate, right? Like I'm not sure how they're getting to a recovery rate. You call in and say, okay, I'm now recovered. I don't know if that's happening.
So this is the interesting thing, right? So this is where we come into what is the right data that we should actually be looking at. So first of all, there's a number of different factors, right? So one is it the number of infections? Is it the number of deaths? If it is infections, is an infection as reported? Is an infections as self-reported, or is it actual? Is it asymptomatic, symptomatic? Should we be looking at something called R0, which is R0 is based on the number of people that dudes infect. That's built in. There's like a whole bunch of different metrics that epidemiologists look at.
R0 to manage that inflection point, right?
Yeah. So that's actually that's the metric. Or do we look at hospitalization? The number of ventilators. Do we look at the number of beds? It's all these different metrics are all over the place. Like, what is the right metric? For me, the right metric is deaths. But even then in itself is like, are we understating or we're overstating? So Financial Times tracks a whole bunch of they basically have a look at the number of reported rates of deaths at a certain time of the year. So for argument's sake, let's say every year in June in South Africa, and I'm not saying there's a number, I didn't have a look at it, but let's say on average in June, every day we have 1,000 deaths, right? If suddenly we have 1,200, it's 20% more. Those 20% more, over the long run, can be attributable to A, B, C, D. It just so happens that this is the outlier event, right? So that's how Financial Times have been tracking things. The interesting thing is, in their tracking dashboard, there's only 2 countries where the excess deaths are negative, i.e. there's less people dying at this time of the year than usual for the last couple of years. Israel is one, and South Africa is the other one. Well, up until we released the lockdown.
But that does make sense because we've been effectively in lockdown. So we're not out killing each other, road accidents are down, etc. I agree with you on the deaths. What I would also add to that, though, is actually the hospitalization. I know this is not the flu in terms of symptoms, but the pattern may be very flu-like. And the reality is we may be having, the latest number from the Panda group, the Pandemics Analytics and Data Group, is minimum 10,000, maximum 20,000 deaths. The World Health Organization is saying 23,000 deaths. And you kind of look at this and you kind of go, what the hell is actually going on here? And I raise a few more questions around this, and I'd be interested to see if you've been able to understand the parameter on this, because the numbers to me are a con, because we are effectively in a lockdown, but probably 80% of South Africa cannot physically lock down. The network through the taxi association is operating at 70%, which certainly makes it spreadable. You look at the living conditions of the vast majority of South Africans, a lot of them squashed into very small condensed environments, sharing pretty essential facilities like toilets, etc. How is this not spreading exponentially faster than the actual numbers? So that for me is the first question. Because I reckon we've done a perfect social experiment on herd immunity, and this is no longer about COVID. This is purely around manipulation of data for political gain. I don't buy the numbers whatsoever. I've actually stopped looking at them. I don't know your thoughts. And I mean, I'm being extremely cynical because I can't make sense of the numbers. And sorry, just to add on to that, I mean, I know our average population, which in itself is a very concerning figure because I didn't know it before, is 26 and a half years old, which says a lot about the last 27 years, quite frankly. But also, and I don't mean that in a negative context. It's kind of like what's going on in South Africa. There's an exponential growth here as well, and we've got a population issue coming down the road. So that is something that we can't hide away from. We've also obviously had the different, I forget what it is, we all at birth got vaccines around certain vaccines, and that apparently has an impact, and ourselves and one other country have had it. And then obviously,
Portugal.
Is it Portugal? I forget the exact terminology on that. Sorry, I should have actually checked it before. And then obviously you've got the HIV, the immune medicine that's been shared. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts from looking at the data, not, yeah.
Yeah, so the one vaccine that we're talking about is the BCG. It's the basal calmette-guerin, right? So just thanks to Google, I can pull that up and look very smart. But it's the BCG.
I was going to say, yes, Craig, you're good, but yes.
You're like, where the hell did you get that from, right? So that's the vaccine we should have gotten when we were kids. So here's the point that you raised, which is super interesting, right? First of all, and it's a huge assumption, the assumption is the data is correct. So let's assume, first of all, the data is correct. No garbage in, garbage out, right? So let's first assume that the data is correct. I can't understand why the Western Cape is flying. And the numbers are off the charts, greater than Johannesburg, Gauteng, and Eastern Cape is catching up. So Eastern Cape, Western Cape, I can understand because there's no physical barriers, but it's easier to get in and apparently transit across. Whereas at least Gauteng, you got to cross provincial lines, and you can block that to a certain degree. So the transit flow is bigger. But Western Cape and Gauteng, the numbers at one stage when I was tracking the numbers, their infection rate was 12 times higher. In terms, and when I say infection rates, I mean the rate of positive test numbers per 100,000. At one stage in the early days, it was anything between 14 and 12 times higher. It's now dropped. It's now about 7 times higher. Right? What is the difference between Western Cape and us? Is it the ocean? Is it the mountain? Well, epidemiologically, those things make no difference whatsoever, right? So is it township living? Now, I'm not an expert in township and rural area living, but I suspect, having gone to some of them, the concentration is pretty much the same. There may be some variance around behavior, but I can't see the difference. The only thing I can see, and I've read this and I've heard about this, is the difference in testing methodology. So is it active versus passive? Okay? So active is the dudes in Western Cape are going out. They're going out and testing people. So they're finding hotspots. They're testing these guys and saying, okay, cool. Because you're looking for it, you're going to find it. Versus it's said, and maybe let's not have a look at Johannesburg. Let's have a look at Limpopo. Limpopo, by all intents and purposes, has got nothing. There's like nothing. Northwest as well, right? Is that a function of not being anything, or because they're saying, let's wait for our hospitals to report, bearing in mind they've got fewer hospitals?
Yes.
Or what's going on, right? So first is your methodology. Like any scientific thing, what's your methodology around this? What that then says to me is, I'm not saying that the Western Cape's out of control. I'm also not saying they've got it under control. All I'm saying is the methodology affects the numbers. So that's the first piece that is super duper important, right? The second thing towards your point, Mike, and it's a great one, right? Do we believe the numbers? Do we not? Well, our dear friend in the US, the great Donald Trump, what did he say 3 days ago? He said, if we stop doing testing, the numbers will come down. We'll have no cases, which is obvious. If you don't do testing, we'll have no. It doesn't mean we're going to have no cases, right? It's like Trevor Noah says. Well, if you turn off all the cell phone cameras, there'll be no violence against black people. So it's a false dichotomy that we have over here. So the first is, do we trust the numbers? The second thing is, are we even looking at the right kind of numbers? I think the numbers are, let's say, massaged. I don't think they're completely cooked. I think they're massaged. Now, are they being used for political gain, etc.? I don't want to go that far. I don't want to speculate that far. I'm trying to understand the numbers, because we can only go so far as the numbers. Right? I can say that the numbers follow, strange enough, a eerily good, I don't want to say prediction, but a rate.
Yep.
And by that I mean this. So in my little model that I have over here, it's super duper rudimentary, right? Essentially what I've done is I've taken the last 3 days and it's a weighted average. It's really that simple. It's that simple. You take the last 3 days, weighted number, average increase, add it to the new number, and you get that out, right? So it's a super duper, it's not hard. And my numbers have been within, let's see, I'm just looking over here, let's just say the last month. In the last month, the forward projections of everything that I have had has been within 2%, barring 2 days.
Yeah.
It seems too right. And then if you want to go a step further and you say, okay, cool, again, assuming the numbers are correct and assuming that it's based off number of infections, let's go look at the number of tests.
Yes.
Any logical say, if we have a look at the number of tests, the tests should be increasing as we try to find out where these hotspots are. But the tests don't. The tests fluctuate. They go up and down. Right? That may be, now, this is also when we start moving out of the realm of data. Now we move into behavior. We move into real-world situations around the catalyst for the test, etc. But the fact is that, now we're starting into this different realm. Where this comes down to, if you go to the extreme end of this, which is where it becomes even more interesting, is the extreme end of this whole conversation is then you get guys who come up with conspiracy theories, which, we can chat about if you want to, but then that's like 5G causes coronavirus, etc., right? And there's a behavior piece, so we can chat about that. But to come back to the data, garbage in, garbage out.
No, I quite agree, and I think I will take it a step further, Craig, because I look at the response from our government, and I do think there's a very clear political manipulation, and that's not coming from the data. That's just seeing how they've managed this problem, and they're utilizing this to really consolidate some of their ideology and some of their strategies, in my opinion, and I have no basis whatsoever, and you look at this and it's very easy to suddenly say Western Cape, a DA province, versus the rest of the country, an ANC province, and it's very easy to sit back and say, oh, the DA didn't manage this properly. And I'm just hyper whatever,
Sure.
I can't even say the word. Yeah, I'm hyperventilating. but it's a real, it becomes, and you know what? The one
but hang
thing,
on, Mike, let's pick off there, because that is super important, right? So let's pick off one where it's based off data.
Yes.
Smoking. Right? So let's pick one that's legitimately off data versus,
Yes.
is there. The data says this, right? The data says that in normal times, no corona, which seems like an eternity ago, right? People that smoke have got a higher rate of death. That is a statistical fact. You can prove that it's done, right? That narrative was then used as a justification point around smoking, to ban smoking. Okay, so that I'm cool with that. But then when the justification happened, then they pulled all these reports out and said, well, look at this. But there wasn't a consideration around reports coming out of Italy where smokers, in a weird, bizarro kind of world, seem to be, I'm not saying immune, but they seem to have less fatality rates. Now, is that peer reviewed? No, I can't say that I've had a look at the papers and it's been peer reviewed, but there is a data point. But the flawed data point was then, then the argument was used 2,000 people petitioned against cigarettes. When you look at that and you interrogate that 2,000, I don't know if you guys saw this, even that number was miscounted because it wasn't 2,000. It was like 573 because they track sentiment on emails. But even again, now let's assume it was 2,000 and you're following a process, which is why I come back to methodology. If your methodology was to say 2,000 people say smoking is bad, then the flip side is to say how many people say it should be okay.
Exactly.
They didn't even have a look at this. And that's why, whether it's conspiracy, government or not, whatever the case would be, your methodology has to be such that it's open, transparent, and clear. Now, you have a look at a different narrative, and the different narrative is a place like New Zealand, almost zero. And I'm going to say almost zero because some folks, some of the listeners may have missed this. They actually did pick up two cases.
That's right.
So there were 2 cases. There were none. There's 2. But the reason why this is important beyond the data is this becomes down to a question around trust and belief in my government, and basically social cohesion, social belief, whatever you want to call that. Now, Mike, you and I, we had a bit of a Twitter conversation a couple of weeks ago around, and that's cool. We can chat about that. But the reason I think why New Zealand has essentially, not crushed, but certainly close to it, is because the faith in government by citizenry is so high.
Yes,
Jacinda Ardern, my is an incredible leader, and it's not because of her, not necessarily because of her policies, but because of the human way in which she has led. She's made mistakes, she has admitted those. But she's also the first prime minister in the world to bring her kid to parliament. She's the first woman to stand and say, what's wrong is wrong, what's right is right. Think about the pictures when there was the terrorist attacks in New Zealand and she appears crying and appearing, with New Zealanders and saying, look, this is wrong. It's not yes, but it's no, this is wrong. Yeah. Because of that, there's in government. Now, everything that you said to me, let's have a look at. That's it, Brett. So look at numbers. Numbers aside, do not trust government?
Nope.
Do you, in all fairness, do not trust your companies? Do not trust the banking institution? It's based off the trust and the fabrication of society.
No, totally.
I'm going to just stop pulling this more into a little bit fast forwarding it, and I think this point of trust, where you're going with it, is very valid. And trust was kind of thrown around willy-nilly in government and business, and over the last 30 years, I think consumer trust has been abused, through various marketing technologies and classic example, Trump winning the election, Brexit winning the election. People have been heavily, shall I use the word influenced, just to be polite, manipulated, and the trust has been abused. And I think COVID, we're now very in a state globally of antitrust, and I think we're going to into this really interesting period where businesses are going to have to change their practices. I've just finished reading an article. When I say finished reading, it took 2 hours. It's the most in-depth article I've ever read by the Mail and Guardian in the UK, around the tourism industry and the impact of low-cost tourism on the various tourist destinations, and that whole social responsibility of making sure now, as business, in order to earn the trust of consumers and travelers, is actually what we take out, we need to make sure we're putting back in. We can't have cruise ships come in, destroy reefs, and then go. They have no accountability on the asset that they're making money from, in the same way petrochemical companies do. And so there's going to be this interesting, and I think COVID's going to drive it a lot more around the sustainability and earning society's trust again, and governments having to reposition that, because it feels like we're hitting a big economic reset button across the board. What are your views on that, Craig?
Yeah, so it's super interesting. So while you were talking over there, I was just googling something. It's called the Edelman Trust.
Edelman Trust Report.
Trust Barometer. Trust Barometer, which is basically where guys have a look at trust in government. So I'll give you this. I think it's, again, this is
have they released this year's already?
Yeah, so there's one that I've got right now. It's on Biz News, right? And this was released in January of this year. So there's a bit of a delay. I'm just trying to look at the numbers over here. But this is super interesting, right? So Edelman Trust in Government, The highest one, which doesn't surprise me. Actually, you guys tell me, who do you think has the highest trust in government?
China.
Yeah, China. Off the charts, 90 out of 100, right? But that is a prime example of where data has given us flawed results, because we're saying, the Chinese trust the government 90 because they have no alternative but to, right?
Terrified, right?
It's so
and if they don't say yes, they'll get shot.
Well, this is it, right? So it's super interesting. When I used to do this in-person conferences, you'd go around and you go, tell me how many of you guys in this room, let's assuming there's 100 people, how many of you folks trust trust business, trust other, and then we'll say, how many of you trust government? And there's maybe like one or two hands. You're like, yeah, whatever, right? And then you say, well, how many of you think that what the number would be in China? And everyone goes, oh, no, the number's everyone. Because what happens is everyone looks around and goes, oh, who didn't put up their hand? Because, you're not going to see them at the next conference, right? But this thing is super interesting because this Edelman Trust Barometer says that the top 26 in the world have got a trust of 49 out of 100. So the best 26 in the world don't even trust their government half of the time. Not even half the time. In South Africa, the number is 20. 20 out of 100.
20. If I was our government, I'd be focusing on that one specific number.
Yeah.
Earn the trust of your citizen.
So then,
is that viable? I mean, clearly governments have never really had to focus on that number.
No, they haven't. They haven't, because you know what? It's a very simple strategy, and I think this will change. With what's going on in the world, I think this will change, because the strategy by governments is very simple. We create the problem to implement the solution. We do not want a content, happy population, because we cannot control a content, happy population. That is the fundamental mindset, and we apply it straight into our businesses as well. We put teams against each other, and we deliberately create the conflict and the chaos to control rather than to build up. And we're seeing this in the world today. We look at what's happening in the States. A lot of this is driven through this deliberate manipulation, and I'm not going to go into it, and I can substantiate these comments. It's a deliberate manipulation to divide, conquer, control.
Yeah. So there's a few pieces, right? So one is, and we can come back to this, we can talk about surveillance capitalism and the reliance on UBI, etc. But to come back to your point, Brett, and sorry, Mike, I don't want to discount, because I think it is a great piece. But I'll come back to your point, Brett, around trust, and let's make it for a business, right? So the question it's true. I think the premise of WTF is what's business look like in the future, and one of those is trust, and that then means fundamentally, do your clients trust you? Do your customers trust you? Part of that then means is, do you really believe that the stuff that you buy, the services you consume, that these companies are doing the right stuff for you? And one of the biggest reasons why things are becoming better, or at times it seems worse, is actually what we spoke about. It's Twitter. Now think about this, right? So pre-Twitter days, you'd buy something, it would be a piece of crap. And maybe let me not say that. Let's say it was 10% off, but you'd live with it. You'd be like, okay, this is 90% of what I was asking for. It's not that bad, but I'll live with it. Today you get something, you ordered the blue thing, it comes, it's off blue. What do you do? Twitter, first thing. I asked for the blue thing, it's off blue, send me a new thing, right? What that says to me, it isn't just about feedback, but it's about voice of customer. Voice of customer that translates into transparency, which relates back to faster feedback loops. The only way which comes from government, but the only reason why, or the only way you can increase trust with your customer is by having faster feedback loops and being in a place where you can react on stuff. Strangely enough, Mike, to the point that you made earlier around, you mentioned the Panda Group around the statistics around saying this. The challenge with all these, and you're right, the numbers range from deaths in South Africa will be 20,000 on the one end, maybe even 10,000, depending on which one you look at, all the way to like 400,000. I've seen numbers off the charts. How can you have a discrepancy across that? And that depends on the models that you use. And the problem behind that then is not only the models you use, which is garbage in, garbage out, but how responsive is your model. And that ties back to this business trust piece, right? So we can create a robust business. The three of us decide, now we're going to make these water bottles that kind of fades back in and out, right? A picture. But unless we have a supply chain, manufacturing chain.
Amazing bottles, bro. They're like magic bottles, bro.
disappear, right? But unless we have a system that's geared, that can be responsive and we can react very quickly, we're screwed. I spoke at a conference, a digital conference, and it was around manufacturing. And it was all about saying, well, how do you change supply chains? How do you change all your distribution to have a responsive ecosystem? Because the old world of business, where some of your listeners maybe come from a world where Porter's 5 forces are fantastic. You can map out exactly around, your competitors and supply chains, and we can schedule out stuff, and just in time is perfect. You're going to get stuff from China, la 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 la. Doesn't work in this new world.
Blown up.
Yeah, it has blown up, right?
Stuffed.
It's
interesting.
It is very interesting, and it does put data into a kind of a context, because we do, and we hear it all the time. So guys, we need AI, hey? And it's like almost this AI magic bullet that we can just turn on this incredible tool, and no one even understands what this damn stuff does. But we can just turn on this tool and we'll get these incredible insights, and we'll be able to build these incredible products and solutions. So the integrity of data is pretty fundamental, and I'm sure we've all sat on an exco or in some kind of boardroom or some kind of meeting where we've argued our point of view using the same data but manipulated the data to suit our argument. And it's so easy to do. It depends how you model it.
No, 78.3% of the time, I'm incredibly accurate with my data. It's been proven, Mike. And what I've learned from that process is conviction, right?
I'm going to ask Kamoon to do a test on that. I'm going to ask him to build a model to test that. So no.
The bullshit barometer.
It is, well, the normal kind of, the joke, 63% of stats are made up online. But there's a super interesting piece around this, because it's also around, and you've seen this specifically around AI training data sets, right?
Yeah.
And we hear this narrative, and just like you guys, I get fed up around folks saying stuff like artificial intelligence is racist or biased or sexist, or Google is racist or biased or sexist. And I turn around to these guys and I go, hang on, just so we're clear, AI it's a tool. It's a tool. Like, is fire good or is fire bad? What is fire? Yeah. It depends how you use it, right? So where this conversation does become true is the AI, the machine, the technology can be biased, racist, but it's predicated around two primary things. The first is the implicit biases of the program. Right? So we have biases. We all know this, and it's a human development thing, because if I didn't have a framing, I'd have to relearn every single thing the first time I interacted with it. So the first time I met someone who wears a blue jacket that has their hair slightly apart, I'd have to relearn the whole thing.
Exactly.
But my brain says, I've met someone like that. So that's how biases come. So it's natural, it's cool, right? The challenge is when programmers build those things in, and that comes through in the output. So that's challenge number one. The second challenge is around the paucity of data. You pour the data in, and the data says something. Prime example, you can go to the big 4 banks, and I take out Capitec, but any of the big 4 banks, and you say historically, and Brett, you know this coming from that world. Historically, who's your best customer in terms of return on revenue or investments or savings or whatever? And the answer would be a pale male. It would be a Caucasian male, probably over the age of 50, 60. That's what the data says. So you'd go and say, well, if that's the case, that's who we must bank. But there's no ways that can be right. So the data set is also fundamentally flawed, and then the AI becomes, the training set becomes different, etc. But we've got to understand that. And for me, that's where you start pivoting away from just data towards insights.
Yeah, we see that in our own business, right? Just even the quality of the data. I mean, we spend our time building data pipelines to make it real time. And I think what we, like even in business, the fact that it isn't real time means it's batched. If it's batched, there are different batch sequences, which means suddenly combining data sets completely out of sync. So just the times issues around syncing data sets is flawed going into it. So whether or not the bias, whether or not, there's just so many fundamental problems with the data set from the word go.
Well, I'd like to also just add on there, you talk about the bias of the programmer, and I do question that somewhat, because if we're a bank, our objective is to make more money. So the programmer starts with the premise, I need to make more money for my bank. So that is my inherent bias. Correct. So if I'm now, and they're going to start looking for patterns in the data set that's going to produce that outcome for them. And that, you know what, it certainly shows us historical reflections, but we can't sit here and say that AI is biased. I really struggle on this idea because it's not a simple, clear-cut scenario. I mean, obviously, if I'm now Trump in the elections, Cambridge Analytica, very much so. There was a deliberate manipulation around people's emotions and understanding. But, so there are degrees of this. There's a degree of reality around this. So it's a complex field, and I've had this debate. And in fact, I've been at trade shows, and I actually come up, I want to talk about bias. And I look at them and say, I'm not having this conversation with you. Yeah, but you can't do AI because I was like, but I'm not having this conversation with you. I really am not. It's not a conversation.
Okay, let me ask a different question, right? So here's a
conversation.
so here's an interesting one, guys. So let me ask you a simple question. Okay, so we go and we're going to do a sample, right? And for sample size integrity to make sure the data size is big enough, we're going to say 100,000. So we have 100,000 responses.
Yeah.
100,000 responses come back. 40,000 say yes. 30,000 say no. 30,000 say I don't know, or they don't fill in the sheets. What is the answer of yes? How many folks said yes? What percentage? Not absolute.
I would say, yeah, it depends on how you want to interpret that, Craig. Because you're going to go, I'm either going to go pure binary, yes or no. I mean, it's actually a very good example. Or I'm going to go as a total population set. And again, it depends on the outcome, because I can argue and say those yeses, I've got 30,000 who are saying yes, or 40,000. That's my target market. And you know what? If that 40,000 is white male, it's what it is. It's not a bias.
Sure.
So it gets quite... all right, let's just move on.
No, but I'll tell you why that is super important, because these are decisions that business leaders need to make. They need to act on this, right? So it's... And this is, again, I'm thinking about the listeners on this thing, right? It's a real life situation. It may not be 100,000, maybe 100. It may even be 10, right? Whether it's statistically significant or not. But the point is, and you've picked it up very quickly because you've obviously thought about this, is the number of yeses 4 out of 10 or 4 out of 7?
Yeah.
Because that sways our result. It's the same as the elections in the swing states, right? It's the same with data in Western Cape. It's the same as biases.
It's the same with our elections. It's the same with our elections.
Of course. So that, and for me, that's a simple. It seems super duper simple, but it's not super duper simple.
No, it's not. And nothing is super duper simple.
I just think of our days in Google, Craig, where you speak to agencies and they'll talk about this conversion rate, and they'll be like, "No, but my conversion rate's really high," and so you say, well, what are you measuring in your conversion rate? I'll be like, number of people who landed on my website and then took action. And they'll be, okay, but is that action a paid for action? Oh, no, it isn't. So I'm like, okay, well, that's not a conversion rate. Because surely you should be interested in how many people actually bought, for instance, if you're an e-commerce site. And then it'll be like, okay, so what's the conversion rate now? And it's gone down by tenfold, and they're feeling a bit embarrassed. They don't know how to now share it with the customer. And then you'd go, but hold on, the customer spent X amount of media spending on the ad.
Yes.
That's where the spend was.
Yes.
And only 2% of that traffic went to the website. So where do we start totaling this? Because now your conversion is looking like 0.06%. And you get these massive debates. And exactly to that point, people manipulate and choose what the bias is. It's actually coming from humans at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, and it does happen. I mean, when I was at Mindshare, one of our agencies that we worked with deliberately manipulated the data to give it to the client to make us look bad. I mean, it caused a huge ruckus. I mean, obviously the client wasn't that stupid, and it blew back on them, because I was like, no, come guys. You got to have 100% accurate. So, Craig, final question from my side. Big things coming out of COVID. Where do you see, I mean, if you just look at the future, what are the bright spots for you?
The bright spots, so the good stuff that's come out of this, right? So let's talk, because there are a few. There's actually quite a few, and it depends on your perspective, right? So the first is Brett alluded to this. He called it the Great Reset. I wish and I pray that it's a Great Reset. I don't. Yes. I fear that human behavior is such that, we just go back and it's just a pause. And when I say that, I don't mean economic. I don't think it's going to be a V-shaped rebound. I think it's going to be a W, or maybe even a worse, an L. But I think behavior is such that people go back to stuff, right? So I don't think it's a great reset. I think it's a great pause. And the great pause has given us the chance to think about stuff. And when I say stuff, I mean it's given us the ability to say, we're at home close to 100 days, some of us 100 days, some of us 2 days, or whatever the hell the number is. But it's given us the ability to think, what's really important? What's really important for us now? What's the kind of business we want to do? What's the kind of families we want to lead? What's the kind of relationships that we want to nurture? So that's given us a great ability to step back and think about things. I think it's given us the ability also to tie into this narrative. How do we use data? The Panda guys are super interesting, and quant jocks are super interesting because you can, as we said right now, you can model anything out. You give me a big enough data set. What do they say? 10,000 typewriters, 10,000 monkeys, 10,000 years, I'll write out the complete works of Shakespeare, right? So data and numbers, we can go there. So I think there's the piece around saying, can we think rationally about data and numbers and models versus drag and drop extrapolate? And how do we fit that in? But I think the biggest piece, and it comes back to the Jacinda one, and I'm going to draw it to our country, at least in the early days. Think about how excited we were when we were waiting for Cyril. And his first two speeches specifically, his first two ones were specific because he was human. He came and said, guys, this is tough. Like, we're in this together. We're going to go from here. And it wasn't really so much, look, it was what he said, but it was also how he said it. You get to relate to the dude. Look, this guy's stressed out, and then the mask moment, and it's over his eyes, and we're like, I guess he's human after all, right? So the bright spot out of this, the biggest bright spot for me is, in this crazy time, it's how do you be more human, not less human? And I say this in all my talks. Never mind the data, never mind smart scientists and quants and consultants who will drag and drop stuff, make arguments. Your data is going to be stuffed, right? Specifically in this kind of world. And before we end, I just want to give you a little bit of a framework. But your data isn't going to give you all the answers. At the same time, you also can't fly in the absence of data. It comes down to the human piece. How can we be human in the business that we need, and how can we be more?
Yeah, love that. I absolutely love that, Craig. But I think there's a more important question, though, Mike.
Is it time for a beer? Sorry.
No, this is really important.
Sorry.
I mean, who are you representing, Craig? Rick or Morty?
It's got to be Rick. Without a doubt, it's got to be Rick, right? But that's a question. I'll tell you why it's flawed. Because if you follow Rick and Morty, it's a multiverse. So this version of me is supporting Rick. There's another version of me that supports Morty. Right?
So for those of you who don't know what his background is, go Google it.
One final point, guys, and I want to leave you with this because I think there's a bit of a summation, and I just wanted to bring in, it's part of what I'm doing my PhD around futurist thinking, etc. Right? And in my field, you hear stuff like trends, foresight, scenario planning, strategy. How do all these pieces fit together? I won't go too in depth into this, but if you have a look, and it's a 2x2 matrix, because part of my sins is I've got a business degree as well, and you can map anything in a 2x2 matrix. But in the quadrant of the known knowns, which is the stuff we know, we can predict, we can model. Models are they're great. We can do the data, we can do the analysis, we can go. That's the Panda guys. That's where the Panda guys sit, which is where they rule supreme. The quant guys rule supreme in the world of the known knowns. In the world of the unknown knowns and the known unknowns, okay, and again, it's going to be a little bit complicated, but essentially what I'm saying is in the stuff where you kind of know what's coming on, but you don't know how much of it, okay, where you need to be able to have different views and different lenses, and you need to think about the world that we want. So what is the business that you want 10 years from now? Then the world of the unknown, so we actually don't even know what's coming along. And by the way, COVID was not a black swan, which fits into the world of black. It's a white swan. So we knew it was coming, we just never acted. But in the truly unknown unknowns, we just don't know what the hell's coming. The way you react for business folks is, as I said before, you have to have these super quick feedback loops, and you have to be able to react pretty quickly. That's where you put the customer at the center of stuff. If you come from an old world, known knowns, Porter's five forces, SWOT analysis, you can understand, control value chains, supply chains, that's cool. But we're shifting into this crazy world where things are moving quicker and more exponential and more diverse, and it's a crazy world. So just a very high level, think about that. That's how these different pieces fit together.
Lovely.
Absolutely fabulous. In fact, that's why I'm a big fan of Agile, by the way, as a way of working. You're in this constant feedback loop, and you're responding based on what's in that feedback loop, not what's on a business plan that might have been written 3-4 years ago.
And that's the key point, right? Which is why for me, why that is so important. And it's beyond in business. It's the response of businesses to this kind of stuff. It's a response for government to COVID. The comparison and the trade-off between lives and livelihood around health and economy, it's a flawed narrative because you can't weigh these things off because one is a known. I can measure the impact around dudes not having jobs, but I can't measure the impact of COVID because I still don't know what's going to happen to these dudes 5 years from now. And that's why it's a fault.
Wow. Love that, Craig. Absolutely love that. So, Mike, I think on that note, Craig, as usual, phenomenal, but
it's been fun, man.
And I'm loving your glasses. They're looking really good.
Well, I gotta try and look intellectual at some way. I realize that without glasses, people will take you for granted, which is why no one takes you seriously, Brett.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, how often people fly on stage, so that also is probably a problem.
Right on that. Oh no, God, the image. On that note, I'm out of here. Craig, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. A lot of fun as always.
Yep.
Fantastic, Craig.
Well, it's been fun with you, not with Brett. But anyway, thanks, Craig.
Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers, man.